And we'll be live in about 30 seconds. And good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another live Xanadu Gallery Art Business Academy online critique group session. Today's session is an Ask Me Anything session, which was postponed. We were supposed to have had this discussion last week, but as you saw in the email, we had a little bit of a water penetration issue in our gallery space. I went in depth into what happened in our Art Business Academy Q&A session, so I'm not going to do that here, but just want to let you know we're fine. Insurance is working on getting our space put back together. Miraculously, no artwork was destroyed. We had a couple of frames that had a little bit of damage, so we feel very fortunate. The timing, while it's never good to have something like this happen, having had it come at the end of the season instead of at the beginning or in the middle of the season was very fortunate for us. So all will be well. We're learning a lot about the intricacies of working with different insurance adjusters and deductibles and all those kinds of things, subrogation. So I'm sure I'll have more to share once the story kind of plays the rest of the way out. But today I want to get to your questions. I received a good number of great questions. My goal today is to dive in and get as many of those questions responded to as I can, while at the same time giving us some good depth on those questions. So I want to jump right into it. And the first question comes to us from Nina Baldwin. Let me pull it up here. And Nina says, I was once told that in order for a painting to be successful, it needed to have a surprise, something different to get a viewer's attention to make that sale. Is this true? So there certainly are a lot of things that we've heard people say, over the years, axioms that do this or do that, and you're sure to have a piece of artwork sell, or if you don't do it, you're handicapping yourself. I would say that I can see some wisdom in this kind of approach, that we want to capture people's attention with our artwork, that if there can be something that's a little bit unexpected or surprising, we can do that and capture their attention, and that can certainly be parlayed into a purchase. But I would not take this as some kind of law, and I certainly wouldn't allow it to become an impediment to your creative process, to where you're thinking, oh my goodness, I'm just painting another landscape and there's really nothing surprising about this landscape, so what's the point? Because I think that while it's true that a surprise can help a piece of artwork get that attention, ultimately, the connection that a viewer is going to make with a piece of artwork is not dependent upon that. There are many different ways to create that kind of connection. And, once that connection is made, then it's our job to kind of help solidify it and move a purchaser to make a decision to buy. And so, yes, I will immediately admit that I do have several artists in my gallery that are doing something that gets an ooh and an ah kind of effect when people see it. And it is because it has a little bit of a surprise. And it's interesting to kind of see how these artists work. Consistently gets that kind of response, and it does lead to some success, but that is a very much a minority of the artwork that's in my gallery, and so I just would not depend on that. And it's amazing when someone does fall in love with a piece of artwork. It can be surprising what it is that makes that connection and what is surprising to them in the artwork. So Nina, keep creating what you're excited about, and don't worry about seeking out some great surprise. The next question, and I've actually got a couple of questions that are kind of in a similar vein here, and so we've grouped them together. And Francis Listo in Colorado says, I carve stone. How can my work be cohesive? Just keep carving bunnies or moons? That's boring and not very creative. Sure, I can carve bunnies standing, sitting, doing whatever, but still boring. I know painters' cohesiveness is painting barns or flowers or Indians 1,000 ways. Clay workers do 1,000 buffalo, horses, or busts. They can be creative in color, mood, and subject. I don't want to be restricted or confined to one idea. That's being productive and not creative. So there's Francis' take and some very valid points. And let me just throw one other here. And this is Linda from Florida says, I do watercolor and acrylic abstracts. Should I choose only one medium? They're similar but different in style just because of different medium. So, these really are two questions about consistency, and we get a lot of those questions here, and a lot of our discussion in our weekly sessions is about exactly these kinds of issues. How can an artist create a cohesive, consistent body of work without becoming repetitive, without feeling like they are running an art factory and just stamping out the same work over and over again? And, whenever I do a blog post about consistency, and especially if I share it to social media, there is an amazing amount of blowback on my suggestion that an artist should strive for consistency. And typically, the responses I see on social media, it's pretty clear to me that those posters have not really read what I'm saying about consistency, that they've just kind of jumped right to the conclusion that as a commercial gallery owner, my only interest is into roping you as an artist into some kind of pen, chaining you up and having you produce the same artwork over and over again. And that is not at all the case. Instead, what we're really trying to do is to strive to have you as an artist find and cultivate a vision for your work, and to create a body of work that is identifiably yours. And there are a great variety of ways in which you can do that. And I thought it's worth just pulling up my criteria for judging consistency. I haven't done this for a while. When we first began the online critique group, I would bring this chart up every time we'd be talking about consistency. And I realized it's been a while since we've talked about it. And so, just briefly, when I'm looking at an artist's work, I'm looking at these 6 areas, and kind of just trying to get a little bit of a sense of where the artist's voice is, what they are doing to create consistency. And so I'll look at the subject matter, the thematic elements in the work, the style, palette, medium, and presentation. And if I can find that an artist is consistent across 4, sometimes maybe 3 if the consistency is really strong, but 4 of these areas, then you get some latitude to introduce some variety in the other 2 elements. And so, for example, in the examples we've been given today, well, if you're a stone carver, that sounds like you are using a fairly consistent medium. And if your style, your approach to treating the stone is consistent, and the way you're presenting that work, and palette, which was mentioned, just by the nature of the stone, you're not going to probably be making a lot of changes in terms of colors and values and those kind of things. So that's likely to be fairly consistent. Well, that then means that you can introduce some variety in terms of your subject matter or the thematic elements, and still have a cohesive body of work. And I can think of several artists that I've known over the years who have worked in stone, who do have a variety of different subjects, but because they are very cohesive in terms of the materials that they're using and kind of their stylistic approach. And I realize that some of these terms we use, style, well, what is style? And how would you judge if it's consistent? It can be a little bit challenging. And I would just say that I know it when I see it, that the chisel marks maybe are at a similar level. The compositions are similar. And so that all of that can allow me to kind of get a little bit of a sense of consistency. But it means that as an artist, of course, you still have some latitude to be creative and to be an artist. You want to express yourself and you want to explore. And so if you can find ways to tie the work together, you can do that while still having some variety. It is a balancing act. Where and in fact, I liked the way Francis put it, that creativity versus production. Well, I would argue that there is an argument to be made for working towards a balance of those two things. That the more consistent you are and the more defined your vision is, the more productive you can ultimately become. And that for an artist who's seeking commercial success, who's seeking to sell, and not every artist is seeking that, but for those that are, finding that balance and figuring out what your goals are in terms of consistency is going to go a long way in helping you achieve that success. Let me pause here and go ahead and open it up for discussion on consistency, because I think there's always room to have a little bit of a conversation. I would love to hear from any of those of you who are here in the video panel. Do you struggle with consistency? Do you have questions about consistency? And of course, we're doing this without looking at examples of your work, so we're going to be on a little bit of a theoretical level. But let's just have that discussion a little bit. Beverly, I think I see you, and then I'll go to Adria.
Yes, well, I've followed your ABA course, and I really have worked hard on consistency, and I would say it's really improved my work a lot. I can now hang it together and see what goes together, and it helps me improve my work as well, because then I can put, say, 4 together and I can see if one's not as strong as the others, so I know I can see if it hasn't got as much light in as the others, and things like that. I just really would say the consistency thing's very important.
Yes, and it's a great point. I apologize. I forgot to turn my phone ringer off. Give me 1 second. There we go. And to go back to Francis's point, and I suspect that Francis has probably never carved a bunny, so I like the argument there. But there is an argument to be made. I think the concern is that, well, if I'm doing the same subject over and over and over again, I'm going to be bored. My work is going to be stifled, and my creativity is going to be crushed. And maybe for some of you, that's true, that you need the variety. And so you can focus on other areas to find cohesion in your work. But what you might also find is that you become a master of bunnies, or whatever your subject is, and that there is some, that is a big part of the creative process, is becoming a master of your medium or a master of your subject. And as Beverly says, that as you work towards that and create more and more work, there can be some real benefits that come out of it. So I would just say, don't knock it until you try it when it comes to creating some consistency. And I would even suggest that you might find some real strength in starting working towards having very cohesive, consistent work and getting some repetition going, and then working your way back from there, and introducing variety slowly into that, rather than thinking about, I just want to be creating a huge variety of work, and then something that interests me, maybe I'll explore more of that. I think that there is a real benefit that can come out of striving for cohesion first and then working our way back. Adria Becker, I think you had a hand up or a comment as well. Let's see if we can get you unmuted here. It should be asking you to unmute or click on the microphone. There we go.
I have two very distinct, what I feel are two very distinct bodies of work. I do large oil paintings, large, colorful, kind of semi-abstract oil paintings, and figure drawing. Very, very different. I could actually just show you what I'm talking about. Can you see that? They're both mine.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so I have many, many of both. And there is a tendency to show them separately, but I'm just wondering if if I should maybe stop showing one group or the other.
Yeah, it's a great question. And you know, again, just briefly seeing the work there, we can see that there are from some very distinct differences between, you know, technically, aesthetically between the two work. And ultimately what I think about um, is the potential viewer and buyer who would be interested in one likely to be interested in the other? And if the answer is maybe not, you know, maybe they're going to be different, have different aesthetic interests, then I think it is a good idea to kind of separate the work. And I do know artists who have different lines of work that they're creating and showing and selling, and that can work. I would just say that as you're thinking about building your career as an artist, and especially if you want to focus on working with galleries and starting generate a following for your work, that it is a good idea to select one of your bodies of work, to put all of your current emphasis and focus there. And you know, so you're not dividing your time and your effort. You can still create the other work, but that by having that kind of focus on one of the bodies of work, you can really increase the likelihood of finding an audience for that work and getting it to sell. And then as that becomes more successful, then you can step back and say, okay, now do I want to put some of that same kind of effort into my other body of work? But my advice is, yes, select one of those bodies of work. And I would suggest you select the one that you're currently most excited about exploring and producing, and put your efforts there. Joe, I think I see you've got a hand up too. Yes, if I can get you unmuted here. It should be asking you to unmute, or you can click on the microphone. There we go. Gotcha, Joe. And Joe was a featured artist several weeks ago in the critique group.
Yes, and my goal was to go back to what your first caller or your first person said about the selection process. I have, at least in our online critique, 6 different styles, and that's more than that. And what do I choose to be consistent with? That's my question. I'm at the very beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is, and ultimately, when we ask a question like that, right, which body of work should I choose? What we're also asking is, I would suspect, which of those bodies of work is most likely to be successful? Which one is the audience going to be most interested in? You know, if I focus my efforts there, it's more likely to bring me success. And so I would love to have an objective answer about which of these bodies of work is going to do that for me. And the truth is, while there may in fact be one of those bodies of work that would ultimately find the widest acceptance, it is almost impossible to objectively take the subject matter or the style and pull it apart and scientifically analyze it to come up with the body of work that's guaranteed to lead to the most success. Instead, and I think if we try to go down that path, you know, down that path, we will find a straitjacket and a locked padded room, because there's just too many variables involved to be able to second guess. And so I think in much of life, and certainly when it comes to creating art, to showing art, even in my gallery, selecting which artists I'm going to show, it's not so much about making the right decision as it is about making the decision, and just deciding I am going to go in this direction, and I'm going to pursue it, and you know, give my all to making this direction take off. And you know, a lot of times in life, I read Ulysses S. Grant's biography by Ron Chernow a couple years ago, and part of the reason that he was so successful as a general is because he wasn't afraid to make the wrong decision. He was far more afraid of not making a decision. And I think in a lot of life, that's what we have to do, is just kind of decide and go forward and make that decision work.
Thanks. The first one that you mentioned was the worst thing you could do is paint by committee.
That's exactly right.
Yes.
Yeah. It
And,
just
so what I've
works, and ultimately we just want to push forward.
Right. What I've kind of decided after our online critique a few weeks ago was I'm just going to do what I like to do best.
And honestly, I think that is, if you kind of think about, okay, what's going to keep me going? What's going to keep me motivated? You better be doing the work that you're passionate about.
Yep.
You know, if you are trying to do work that you feel like, well, somebody else told me that, you know, desert sunsets or what's going to sell, you're going to very quickly run out of steam in creating that work. So do what you're passionate about, and then be equally as passionate about getting the work out there. Okay, I'm going to give Alexandra, she's got a hand up. I'm going to give her the last word on consistency, and then we're going to roll on.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for giving me a word. I want to give an example of what I'm doing with consistency, because my body of work is oil paintings mostly, and live drawing and live paintings performances. So it's completely different, but it does work together in the sense that sometimes I'm performing with musicians on the opening of my exhibitions. Just now in a offer, I had a commission for oil painting based on my previous paintings, kind of development of this one. And now I'm working commission to make a video in the style of live drawing, because now with COVID in Europe, I'm in The Hague in the Netherlands, it's not possible to make performances. Basically, I'm working for my friends, musicians in Germany. So it's kind of, and they are very different in style, or because of the approach. Live performances should be done fast and without hesitation. But they do work together, and they give me a kind of rich creative process, I would say. So I do love them both.
Yeah, and so you know, and certainly I would not suggest or make you think that I think that there is some you know, hard and fast framework that we have to work within, and that there can't be any exceptions. I just want us, when we go to create the work and when we're thinking about getting it out there and having people see it, I want us to be conscious of the experience that people are going to have as they view the work. And if we've got a very disparate body of work that's hard to tie together, think about the effect that that's going to have on the viewer. And their experience, and the difficulty a gallery might have in showing that work together. And, you know, again, it can be a little hard to think about that, but the more we understand the concepts of what it is that could make a consistent body of work, and the more we're conscious of the factors that help tie the work together, the more effective we're going to be. I mean, knowledge is power here. And so I would also suggest that this forum, the online critique group, and our weekly sessions where we get to see a variety of different artists' work, is a great way to start to get even a better sense of that by seeing illustrations of the different possibilities. And that's why we talk a lot about consistency when we're looking at each other's work here. Okay, we've gone on longer than I would have wanted to for consistency, but it's understandable. This is such an important topic. And if you haven't submitted your artwork to be considered for review in the online critique group, I would encourage you to do that. It's a good opportunity for us to look at your work and maybe make some suggestions about the consistency. Okay, let's go to Alicia's question. Alicia is also from Colorado and says, as a fiber artist, I feel like my art does not translate well to a photograph. If I present a digital portfolio when approaching a gallery, do you suggest also taking small sample piece with me? What size would be appropriate? And thank you. So it's a good question. And certainly as we're getting ready to present to galleries, you know, you kind of want to be thinking about formatting and photography of your work. I would just pause to say that I suspect many of us here in this session could take that comment, take out the words fiber art and insert your own medium and say, my artwork also is hard to photograph. My watercolors are hard to photograph. My sculptures are, it's a real challenge to capture the essence of artwork in photography, and to be able to share it in a way that's going to give someone a really strong sense of what the work is. You know, if you're working with textures, depending on the medium that you're working in, giving a real sense of the surface qualities, all of those challenges, you know, make it difficult to reproduce the work and put it into a portfolio. So there are two things that I would say. One is we want to be working toward getting the very best photography that we can. And that may mean that we need to invest a little bit of time and effort into getting some photographic equipment that allows us to capture our work in the way that we would want to, or maybe hiring a professional to help us get some imagery. It means thinking about getting some shots that are maybe non-standard images of our work. And when I say that, what I mean is that if I think of a portfolio and turning page to page, the standard image is, well, I've got a rectangle image of one of my pieces of artwork, and you know, then there's another image of another piece of artwork where I'm just seeing it head on, straight at it, and I'm trying to get the colors right and that kind of thing. But it might also make sense, especially in a fiber artist's case, to get some imagery at an off angle or a macro photo showing me some of the textures and the weaving, and to include some of those photos as detail shots along with the standard photos in the portfolio. What you're trying to do with your portfolio is, as much as possible, capture my attention, show me what to expect with the work, and the more detail you can give me, the more likely you are to be able to do that. Now, having said all of that, don't worry if your portfolio, again, don't obsess over, well, maybe my portfolio isn't able to share my imagery in a way that is going to be most effective, in the sense that as a gallery owner, as I see portfolios, I know that photography is imperfect. And I understand that there are challenges in capturing your artwork. And so if it piques my interest enough to explore more, then yes, there's an opportunity to see samples of the artwork. And it's often the case that I will request for an artist to either deliver a sample of the artwork or maybe ship it to me so that I can see what we're looking at. Now, if you have an opportunity to visit the gallery, as Alicia's suggesting, yes, it is a good idea to bring a sample of your work. And I would hope that I could have a sample that's fairly typical of the work that I'm producing. So in terms of size, if you can deliver a sample that is kind of in the mid-range of your sizes, now, depending on how you're traveling, that might or might not be possible. But you just want to show the, I guess I would say, the most typical and at largest scale that you can, depending on the circumstances. But if the gallery is interested in what you're doing, you know, all of those issues can be worked out. The key is to get the best photos that you can and to get that portfolio into the hands of as many gallery owners as you can. Janet from Missouri has a question about pricing, another hot topic for us, and says, I sell my paintings at lower prices compared to what I see in a lot of galleries. So for example, $1,410 for a 30 by 30 oil on gallery wrapped canvas, unframed. Would this disqualify me from being accepted into a gallery? I think probably disqualify is too harsh of a word. I don't know if I would think of it that way. But again, I would instead try to put myself in the gallery owner's shoes and kind of think about their considerations as they're going to show an artist's work. And a lot of their considerations are similar to yours. You know, they want the very best artwork that they can get to display in their space, and they want it priced appropriately so that it generates a good volume of sales and at an optimal price point. And so that means as a gallery owner, I am thinking about having a good mix of different price points in my gallery, from entry-level price points to much more significant price points. And I'm experimenting with different price points over the course of time. And so, it's certainly, you're going to see a range when you go visit galleries or visit their websites. You'll see a range of price points. Now, there are some challenges on either end of the spectrum. It is likely that my gallery is going to have a range of price points. And if artwork is brought to me that is way outside of my typical lane of price points, it's going to give me pause. And that would be true if you came in and showed me a $400,000 piece of artwork. I'm going to have to say to myself, at this point, my range is basically, up to about $50,000, $60,000. We've sold artwork up to $100,000, $110,000, but 400 is significantly outside of that range. How likely is it that I'm going to attract an audience that would be in a position to make a purchase at that end? At the same time, I'm also going to ask on the other end, at the low end, is it worth showing that artwork and hanging it on the wall and taking up valuable display space, where even if it was selling at a rapid clip, I've got to consider whether that's optimal for that space. And I suspect that at the price points Janet mentions, at $1,400 for a 30 by 30, that's going to come out to what? 30 be 47. That comes out to about $1.50 per square inch. And that's something that a gallery is going to look at. And that probably is a little bit toward the low end, but it's not radically outside the range of what galleries might consider a reasonable, price range. There are galleries out there who are selling work in the $1.25, $1.50, $2 per square inch. It's a little low for my gallery, so it would be a consideration, and I might encourage an artist who's bringing me work at that price point to consider bumping it up. But Janet, I think you're not so far out of range. I mean, with just a little bit of a boost, you would put yourself into a price range that would be very reasonable to expect to see in a gallery. So again, pricing is something we'll talk about repeatedly in these sessions, and we'll talk about the considerations that go into pricing. Neera from Boston asks a question that's going to be very difficult for me to answer. And that is, do you think that COVID-19 changed the approach to art? Now, there are two ways I could take this question. One is, has it changed the artists who are out there creating their approach to creating art? I'm probably not qualified to answer that question. I am seeing some new subject matter and new approaches to creating that are coming about. Has it changed the business of art? And that one maybe I can talk about a little bit more, and that is that certainly over the last year, galleries, art shows, and festivals were very much impeded in their typical activity, and that had a significant impact on sales, and not only in the short term, but it was also decreasing the exposure people were getting to art, and just kind of, like many other businesses, just kind of put a big roadblock in the way of running a typical business. And so, it certainly changed some pretty dramatic things for us at Xanadu last year. One was that we did a lot more online activity and a lot more remote interaction with our clientele than we had previously. We were more proactive in the emails communication that we were sending out, and just much more engaged digitally than we had been previously. And my response to that has been, boy, why did it take a pandemic to get us to the point where we were doing that? Because it's had a big impact on our interactions, to the point where now Now that typical interactions with clients are returning and we're starting to get visitors in the gallery, our online activities are a great enhancement to those activities. I do think that we're going to see, and of course I'm knocking on wood and crossing my fingers, but I do think we're going to see a return to a somewhat more normal, typical art market. We're seeing, during our busy spring season, we saw a lot more visitors coming into the gallery, people traveling, and I suspect that over this summer we're going to see more and more of that, a return to normalcy there. But hopefully we've learned some lessons that are going to help us take advantage of that. I mentioned it in our Art Business Academy session a couple of weeks ago. I mentioned that we've seen a huge uptick in sales, dramatic uptick this season, even over 2 seasons ago before the pandemic. And, I think some of that is pent up demand, but I suspect that also, we've learned some good lessons that are serving us well as we go back into a normal art market. So time will tell what the differences are. It'll be very interesting to be having this discussion a year from now and 2 years from now, and to see what the long-term impacts were. Susan from Ogden, Utah. And I've spent some time in Ogden and Ogden Valley. But Susan asks, my figurative ceramic relief sculpture for the wall is unusual and of social justice nature. Subject matter includes a loving homeless family, portraits of a homeless man in the park, a loving couple, an essential worker. How do I find a viable place to sell this work? And so again, and I would suspect that there are a good number of us here who likewise could ask that question. I'm doing something that does not fit in the broadest mainstream of the art market, subject matter wise or style wise. How do I find an audience and a market for this work? I have said it here many times as we've looked at each other's work. I firmly believe that no matter what kind of subject matter you're focused on, what your medium is, I believe that you can find an audience out there. We are fortunate to live in a time when there are more art buyers than there have ever been. There's more discretionary income available for people to purchase artwork than there's ever been. And, we have modes of reaching those audiences online and through social media that had not existed, up until 15, 20 years ago that give you more of a direct line. And it also gives you a direct line into galleries. My suggestion would be, and I don't want to sugarcoat at all, that there could be, when you're working with creating work that potentially has a narrower appeal, and I would include artwork that is of a political or social nature that the audience for that work is perhaps smaller than the audience for more neutral artwork. I guess I'll just say it that way, and that's probably not even the best way to say it. But that just because it's a narrower audience doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and there are opportunities with narrow audiences to create very excited and faithful collectors. And so your job, Suzanne, is to, I would start by doing some research and seeing if you can find some other artists who, again, would have a similar appeal, who are doing work that is of a social justice kind of nature or a social commentary. And they're out there. There are a lot of them out there. I see their work, and I would kind of see what they're doing. Where are they showing their work? What's their messaging? In their social media, on their websites, and try and find how they are reaching their audiences and work towards replicating that a little bit. And then I guess the other thing I would say is that you are going to need to be very persistent. When I'm working with artists and advising artists about getting into galleries, my advice is you're going to need to approach a good number of galleries. And my starting suggestion is you should have a list of 100 galleries that you're targeting with your portfolio. Well, for an artist who's in a more of a niche, you may need to have a longer list of galleries to approach, and be a little bit more persistent. And so I would just encourage you to, again, you're passionate about this work, you're going to keep creating it. Work towards creating a portfolio and to getting that out into galleries that could be interested in that, and just giving a lot of them the opportunity to see it. I think I've got time for one more question. I did a better job at going deep than I did going broad with the questions today, but this one from Ann, who's in Scottsdale, a local artist to me. And Ann says, my glass sculptures are fragile, which scares potential buyers. How do I convince them to buy? Boy, it is a good question. And I have sold, over the years, I've sold a variety of artwork that was, from a logistical standpoint, a little bit more of a challenge. I have sold blown glass work that was very fragile, and sold quite a bit of it. We've sold steel and bronze sculptures that were very heavy and difficult to move, and works on paper that were of a somewhat delicate nature. And I guess what our job is, as we're showing that work, is we need to help eliminate any of the concerns that the client might have. We're not trying to hide the nature of the artwork. It's glass, it can break, but here are the things that we do to mitigate that risk. We want to eliminate the risk from the collector side, or help them understand how to minimize that risk. And so you can talk about the process for shipping the artwork if it needs to be shipped, and what you've developed or your shipper has developed to help ensure the safe arrival of that work. You can talk about the fact that the artwork is insured. And then I would also say that you can talk about the pleasure that your artwork has brought to people who've bought it, and how much they enjoy, and emphasize the fact, okay, why are you creating your work in glass? What are you able to achieve by using this delicate medium that is somewhat fragile in nature that you could not achieve in any other way? And by sharing that, you're giving them the reason for you to create it, but also for them to fall in love with it and collect it, the effects that they're achieving. And I know, and I have been in the homes of very wealthy collectors who collect glass art, specifically, that they are very interested in having that kind of work. So it's our job to just help them get through any concerns and to work through any issues, and remove the risk. And again, that can be true of any medium that we're using. I did not get to about a third of the questions that were submitted. And so for those of you who submitted and didn't get your question answered, hang on to it. We will have another one of these sessions in June, and I will try and get to your questions then. We do have a weekly Q&A in the Art Business Academy that gives me a little bit more of an opportunity to get to all the questions. So if you haven't joined us there, I would encourage you to check that out and consider joining us. We will be back. I do need to mention that the next few weeks are going to be a little bit tricky in terms of scheduling and timing. We're in the process of winding down our winter-spring season in Scottsdale, and then getting moved and geared up to wind up our summer season in Pine Top. And so we are for sure not going to be having a Wednesday broadcast next Wednesday or the following Wednesday, at least 2 weeks off. And it's possible that that could bleed into a third week. So just keep an eye on your inbox. I will keep you posted. We're going to consider this our summer break from the online critique group. And, it could be 2 or 3 weeks, but we will be back here sharing each other's artwork, answering each other's questions, and, working to build more successful careers as artists together. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We will talk